Grandma's Hand was a song written by Bill Withers about his grandmother. It was included on his first album, Just As I Am, in 1971, and was released as a single. Withers' maternal grandmother had been born into slavery in his youth. Withers attended church with his maternal grandmother, Lula, where she would sing and clap along with the hymns. He later said, "It was spontaneous singing. There was nothing programmed. People got up and sang, and everybody would join in." He said, "It was my favorite kind of singing." That song was penned in 1971. In this song, Grandma's Hands, we hear the wisdom that comes through legacy. Bill Withers recalls the experience of his grandmother clapping in church and the tambourine playing and the words that she would speak into his life. Bill Withers captures the faith of his grandmother through the Sunday morning experience. And not only does he capture his grandmother's faith, he also captures the impact that his grandmother had on other people and the way that she spoke life even into the life of an unwed mother, the way she encouraged someone to put themselves in the hands of Jesus. Not only does Bill Withers recall the experience of his grandmother's faith and the power of her ability to speak life into others, he recalls the tangible presence of his grandmother, even giving him candy and picking him up so much that the experiences that are captured in this song, Grandma's Hands, left such an indelible impact on Bill Withers' life that he said if he would get to heaven, he would look for his grandmother. He understood what it meant to walk in wisdom throughout life. And not only did Bill Withers understand the power of wisdom through life, he understood wisdom's legacy. The reality is, for many of us, whether it's your grandmother, your grandfather, your uncle, the faith leader, the pastor, the Sunday school teacher, there are those who have the power in their hands to influence our outcome. The reality is today we are starting week 4 of our study of Proverbs by Vance Pittman. And this week we look at wisdom and the concept of wisdom walking throughout life. I was particularly excited about Vance Pittman's introduction to week 4 because Vance Pittman took me to Proverbs 31. He took me to Proverbs 31 because he talked about the wisdom of legacy, and that is the wisdom that will walk us through life. Now, the truth be it told, when Pastor Jen and I was talking about this particular sermon series, I said, whatever you do, I'm not preaching Proverbs 31. Whatever you say, I'm not preaching Proverbs 31. And I want you to understand, it wasn't that I don't like the sacred text. I didn't like Proverbs 31, not because of the words, but the way it was used to weaponize women to say that the only way you're going to get married is if you understand Proverbs 31. Well, I may not be married, but I got some wisdom from Proverbs 31 today. And this text isn't just about the wisdom for a wife. It is wisdom for each of us today that we'll hear in the text. Because as we look at this woman in Proverbs chapter 31, we hear a woman who set up future generations. We hear a woman who walked in wisdom throughout life. This woman is described in this particular text, and her wisdom and the power of finding someone whose value is greater than any gem. Here in this text, the king, when he coins this poem, he is looking at the value of the particular woman in his life. But church, I want us to look at the wisdom of this woman in Proverbs 31. This is a woman who understood what it means to put in work and to provide. And she understood legacy that came with not only leaving a legacy with her family of how she was working, but she left a legacy that had to do with financial capacity and investments. This is a woman who understood the value of using her gifts and talents. One who opens not only up herself only for her family, but she opens herself of those in the community. Church, this is a woman who understood that power is in her hands. What is in your hands? The proverbial woman here in this text understood that she lacked nothing. She understood what it meant that she needed to get up and stay up even in the nighttime. She understood what it meant to provide food for her family and portions for those who work with her. She understood and considered. She didn't say, give me a field. No, no, no. She went out and she purchased a field. And from her earnings in the vineyard, she did something with the text. Here, this proverbial woman in Proverbs 31 shares with us the value of not only building legacy, but leaving a legacy. This is a woman who went out in the fields and worked. This is a woman who provided for her family. This is a woman who stayed up even late in the night to do what was necessary in order to take care of her family. This is a woman that understood that trading is profitable. This is a powerful woman here. Like Bill Withers' grandmother, she understood what it needed to be done so that her children could watch her life. She's like many of our family members. She's like those who have brought us a mighty long way. She is like those who raised us. She makes a covering for her bed. She is the one that made garments and other supplies. She is the one who also showed her faith. This proverbial woman understands what it means to set up legacy and to walk through life with wisdom, because the text says she was clothed with strength and with dignity and can laugh with the days to come. This is a woman who demonstrated what it means for us even today to have legacy and to provide wisdom. Church, this morning as I would begin to look at that, I could imagine that many of you all could look back over your life and think about your grandmother. I was preparing for this sermon, and then last night as I was preparing the sermon, there was a picture of my grandmother that I've had since I don't know when. She would be upset with me probably now that I exposed her hair rods on social media. But when I looked at that picture last night after drafting this sermon, I looked at her laying on the sofa. I didn't know then at that age of probably 18 months to 2 years, I don't know, I'd have to ask my mother, but she's laying on the sofa. I'm doing what I do now. I got my arms stretched out. Isn't it amazing how stuff still happens when you chew? I got a passy in my mouth, but my grandmother is laying behind me smiling. I can imagine that my grandmother was smiling because she was like, what I am doing for you is not setting you up for today, but I'm setting you up for tomorrow. Here in this text, the proverbial woman in Proverbs 31, she's setting up her children, her family for tomorrow. She, like Bill Withers' grandmother, is making sure that those who are around her understand that wisdom is in the power of her hands. This proverbial woman not only took care of her children, she invested in their future. Church, this is powerful, and I know that stewardship is coming, but this woman, before we even had stewardship campaigns, before we even had finances, before we even had stocks, understood to set up money and invest in the future and to leave something behind. What are we leaving behind? This wisdom, when we talk about wisdom, walking in faith, it's not for ourselves, it's for our families. And the proverbial woman said, ho, 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 it's not just for my family. In the text, it says, not only did she provide for her children, not only did she provide for her husband, not only did she provide for her family, she provided for the poor and the needy. That's a call, a reminder for each of us to ask ourselves a question. What have you used your hands to do for those who are the least of these? What have you used your hands to do for the marginalized, the impacted? What have you used your hands to do in order to impact those who are hungry? We shouldn't be locking up the homeless. We should be feeding the homeless. If you understand the wisdom of the proverbial woman, you will understand that she's standing on the right side of justice. but the power was in her hands. Not only do we see that the power is in our hands, the text constantly repeats the wisdom and constantly repeats and shows us how she used her hands to make clothes. It shows us how she used her hands to clothe her children. What I loved even more about it is it also showed that she did not worry. She did not live in fear, because the text says that even when it snowed, her household had nothing to worry about it. When it is coldest, when you're in your darkest season, when we leave legacy, and when we live by legacy, we live by the strength of our ancestors and our forefathers who have provided us strength in our darkest hour, in our coldest moment. This woman stood before her family and gave them hope. The proverbial woman was more than just a wife. And while this text grabs us and talks about the noble wife, this text is also meaningful to anyone, regardless of how we feel about our orientation. She is just an example of how all Christians should live. She is an example of how Christ is calling the church to stand up. She is an example of the power we have to impact future generations. What will the children behind us see when they look at this era in our lives? Will they see a church who sat back and said, you know what, we're just going to let all of this hate keep spewing? Or will they see a church who stands up for righteousness? Will we be a church that says, I hear what you're saying, but we will no longer be divided? Will we be a church that understands that the power that God gives through wisdom is in our hands? Will we be a church that comes on the forefront? We don't necessarily have to go out and stand in a line to protest. All we have to do is take care of this side of heaven. And what does it mean to take care of this side of heaven? It means that we pray. It means that we feed the hungry. It means that we lift up those whose heads are heavy laden. That's what Bill Withers' grandmother did. And that's what this proverbial woman does. She lifts up the head of the brokenhearted. When was the last time that we spoke life into someone who's lost a loved one? When was the last time we spoke hope to the mother who's struggling to feed her family? When was the last time we said, hold on, Jesus has you in the palms of his hand? Church, God is calling us to walk through life in wisdom and to lead a legacy. What I like about it, if you can't quite grapple with understanding or seeing yourself as a woman in Proverbs, I want you to think about what Joshua writes. In Joshua chapter 4, he's talking to the Israelites. We know the story, but I'm going to give you a quick recap. In the story, we know that the Israelites had been going through, and they were crossing the river Jordan finally. God was about to bring them over. But what Joshua does is powerful. He doesn't say cross over and forget. He doesn't say cross over and don't leave any indications. He asked for each of the tribes to take a stone. The 12 tribes took a stone, and when they placed that stone, he asked them to place that stone. It wasn't for their sake. It was for those who were coming behind them. Joshua asked them to place a stone so that their children's children will know what my parents went through to get here. And I am so glad that my grandmother, like Bill Withers' grandmother, came from a people of slavery, came from a people who went through bondage, because it's those stones that I stand on to fight for righteousness. It's those stones that I stand on to preach hope into a dying world. It's those stones that your parents leave you of prayer and thanksgiving. It's those stones of wisdom that reminding us that what we do today is not for us. Oh, what you mean? This ain't my Jesus. This ain't just for me and my community. No, when we walk through life with wisdom, when we walk through life leaving legacy, we walk through life giving people hope through Jesus Christ. We leave something behind. We leave tangible and we leave intangible. We leave hope for the next generation. We leave Christ for the next generation. He's not just just my God. He's our God. He's the same God that came from generation to generation. And I'm so glad that Joshua said, let's leave these stones behind, because the stones represent where we come from, but also where we're going. Church, I believe wholeheartedly, while we've gone through a rough week, while the Supreme Court has said it's okay to racially profile, I believe that the church either stands up now or we will remove the stones that Joshua laid down. It's time for us to stand on the side of righteousness and justice. I'm getting ready to close. I apologize for taking so much time because I know we want to hear the baby sing. But what I do know, this proverbial woman and Joshua are teaching us that not only is power in our hands, it's calling us to do something with our hands. I was talking to Deacon Megan this week, and no, I didn't ask her permission to share our conversation. I'll pay for it later. But this week, not like many of the 9 months we've been living in haven't been difficult. This week, we were talking and we're struggling. It's hard to be a faith leader in this generation. It's hard to be a faith leader when those who cause harm claim to know Jesus. It's hard to be a faith leader when people are saying this is what Jesus would do. But I was saying to her, because we were talking about the Supreme Court ruling that that the law of racial profiling has been uplifting, and I said, well, Megan, honestly, as a black woman in America, I've always been racially profiled. As a black woman in America, there's always been the law, but we still have been pulled over. She said she'd been pulled over probably 4 times in her life. I said, I've been pulled over every year of my life that I was driving. The reality is racial profiling, regardless whether it's a law, is not going to change until there is a change in our heart. We can enact every law. It means to care for one another. But until our hearts have been changed, until our lives have been transformed, we will still live with the isms of this world. And today, church, I just vow to say, my grandmother's legacy will not be in vain. She did not fight for civil rights so that I could stand here and preach to you. She fought so I could say God is still our God. God brought the slaves out of slavery, and God will bring us through too. My grandmother had a 3rd grade education. She never graduated high school. Her husband died at an early age. Her mother died at an early age. I watched my grandmother bury all of her siblings and our oldest granddaughter. But my grandmother understood for those of her grandchildren and her children's legacy. A woman who didn't graduate high school made sure we went to college. A woman who was a maid her entire life. I don't know how she did it, but we could always call when we were in college because we skipped our parents. Grandmama need a little change. Now, I hadn't already spent too much money, but I'm going to call my grandmama. My grandmother bought a house and land during a time as a single woman that never should have been able to do it. Why is that important? I want you to think about that person in your life who said, despite what we've gone through, you will still make it. My grandmother, faithfully every Sunday, Lord knows every Sunday, 2-3 services Sunday, we went to church. But she put her hands in Jesus' hands. Church, it's time to fight, but not with our hands, but with our love. It's time to stand up and show the world who Christ really is. A Christ who loved us so much that he gave of his life so that we can be free. Oppress me if you want to, but I'm free. The Bible says, he who the Son sets free is free indeed. Speak love this week. Speak life this week. And yet, though they slay us, we'll be all right. I invite you as you enter life groups over the next 4 weeks to not look at Proverbs and say this is a book of wisdom, but to begin to live out the wisdom that is gained through Proverbs. Amen.
I don't want to go back to Egypt. I don't want to be a slave no more. I don't want to go back to Egypt. God has set us free.
I don't wanna go back.
Don't want to go back to Egypt. I don't want to be a slave no more. I don't want to go back to Egypt. God has set us free.
Inanelo yune.
Inanelo